Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I talk all about hiking, outdoor adventures, travel, nomad lifestyle, all the things. And today I'm really excited to talk about a topic that I'm very passionate about, and that is solo traveling. Solo traveling is something that I always recommend to people, partly because it's so hard to find people to travel with. You know, our schedules never seem to line up with our friends and family. And as we get older, people start having families, and it just gets harder and harder to find ways to travel with your friends. So it wasn't until I turned 30 that I had my first solo travel experience. And to be honest, I was really nervous about it, but now I'm completely obsessed with solo traveling, and I actually kind of prefer it. It's a really great way to meet new people, get to do every single thing that you want to do, and just get out traveling. Because like I mentioned, it's so hard to actually find people to travel with. You know what? The thing that I'm going to really let you guys in on a secret here is that when you travel solo, you actually don't really need to be alone. There's so many different ways to travel solo that you're never actually really alone. And in fact, you're going to end up meeting some amazing people and forming new friendships when you actually just take a chance and try a solo travel trip. So today I'm going to talk about the different ways to travel solo, going from being pretty much with people the whole time, those options, to being semi-independent, but still pretty social, and then the fully independent options. And even if you do go with the fully independent options, I'm going to talk about in another section how to make those connections when you start to feel lonely. And then I'm going to give you tips on how to research where to stay based on things like location and safety, because that's a big one. I know safety is one of the top concerns, especially for a solo female traveler. And then we're going to wrap it up at the end. And just so you know, there will be timestamps below in the description, so if you want to skip ahead to any section, then feel free to. But otherwise, I hope you stay along for the whole video. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first way to travel solo, which I recommend to start out with, especially if you're really nervous about traveling solo, and this way is basically going to be all you're going to be doing for solo travel is essentially flying to the destination, but then you're going to meet up with people. And that's by doing a group trip. So this is how I started out. I did a guided group trip in Europe back in 2016. And it was through a company called Kentucky. There's tons of tour companies out there for all different age ranges, all different kinds of travel trips that you're looking for, whether you're looking for something more adventurous or you want to go somewhere to see different attractions in cities and so on. So I really recommend starting with a group trip, and that way you are not going to be alone. You're going to have opportunities right away to meet people, and you'll make friends instantly. It's inevitable. You guys are all there together. Half of the people are probably going to be traveling solo or maybe with just another friend. So yeah, I highly recommend it. That first group trip I had was amazing. So other than group trips, a few other ways to do this where you are basically never alone is by going on a cruise, going on a retreat, or doing a volunteer workaway type trip. So this keeps you with people pretty much the whole time, so you're never feeling lonely and you have the easiest way to make friends. All right, now let's talk about semi-independent solo travel options. So this is where you're still going to have quite a bit of privacy, but still quite easy to meet other people. So my biggest recommendation for this is to stay in hostels. So you can either do the shared dorm style if you're on a budget, or if you want your own private room, you can usually get a private room at hostels as well. And then there's just always a ton of people there that are looking to meet other travelers to go on excursions with, or, spend the day out in the city together. Yeah, so this is a great way to still have some privacy, you're not obligated to hang out with anybody at your hostel, So you can either decide during a day if you want to have your own time, or most likely you're going to find someone that is looking to get out for the day. And another option, which is actually my favorite option for the semi-independent solo travel, is to rent a private room Airbnb. So that I've done this numerous times when I've gone traveling. So for example, after I did that Kentucky trip in Europe, the rest of my trips in Europe were private room Airbnbs. So I really enjoyed this because I got to stay with somebody who lived there. I got to ask some questions about, hidden gems, where to go, and also how to be safe. The best way you can stay safe is by staying with someone who lives where you're traveling, and they'll tell you like, hey, don't go here, especially at night, kind of thing. So I really enjoyed that. And there was even a couple times when I hung out with my Airbnb hosts and we went out to a pub for the night. So yeah, so private room Airbnbs is kind of like your next step down from staying in a hostel. You're just staying with like typically one other person unless they're renting out multiple rooms. And, they usually completely respect your privacy. If you want to be social, they'll be social with you. If you don't want to be social at all, they'll give you complete space. So, and yeah, private room Airbnbs are another way to budget travel as well. Like I found that sometimes renting just a private room Airbnb is way cheaper than staying in a hostel. And then you still get all of the amenities that you would want. Like usually you can cook in their kitchen. Sometimes you get your own private bathroom. So I highly recommend looking into that option as well. All right, now let's talk about the third option, which is being fully solo, fully independent. You're going to be finding your own private accommodations. You're going to be planning every single activity and all that. It definitely involves a lot more research, but you get complete freedom in your day-to-day activities. You don't have to worry about other people. You are probably going to sleep better, stuff like that. So yeah, there's not too much to say about that other than you're going to have to do a lot of research, which is a topic that we are going to get into later in this video. And the final option, which I highly recommend if you are doing an extended travel trip, is do a bit of all of the styles. Maybe start with a group trip and then do something semi-private and then try a full-on solo independent option. Especially if this is your first time as well, this would give you a really good idea of how you prefer to do solo travel. You'll know for the next time that, maybe you really hated being alone and you're only going to do group trips from now on. Or the opposite, maybe group trips was too fast-paced, too many people, you didn't like the person you got paired up with as a roommate, whatever. So it's a really great way to test out what is going to be the best way for you. And to be honest, for me, I find a mixture is great for me because I don't always want to be completely alone. I like to be with people as well. So the way that I typically travel solo is what's going to bring us right into our next section, which is how to make connections if you are traveling completely solo. All right, guys. So it is really easy to meet people when you're traveling. Like, honestly, I think it's easier to meet people traveling than back home where I live because people who are traveling are wanting to find other people to connect with. There's a lot more people nowadays traveling solo, but, we are humans and we need social connection. At some point, you're going to want to see some people. So first of all, one of the ways is through the magical internet. This has made it a lot more easy for us to be social. And one of the best ways to meet people while traveling is through Facebook groups. So there are a ton of travel Facebook groups out there. If you just go on Facebook right now and go to the groups section and start looking up travel, you're going to find a whole bunch of groups to join. And a lot of groups there's people in there asking if anybody's traveling in a certain location and want to meet up. What happened for me one time was when I was in Nicaragua, I was looking for someone that I could go out on outdoor adventures with. So I posted in a solo female kind of meetup Facebook group that I was going to be in this area of Nicaragua. Here's the dates I'm going to be there, looking for someone who's into these activities. And I ended up meeting a girl who was traveling out there solo. And we did so many adventures together and formed a friendship. You know, we're still in contact. I'm sure we're probably going to travel together again one day. So yeah, Facebook groups, get in there. Don't be shy. Make a post, and guaranteed somebody is traveling where you're traveling and wants to meet up. The other type of Facebook group you can look into is expat Facebook groups. So whatever country you're traveling to, all you need to do is search in Facebook. For example, Colombia expat group. You could even try narrowing it down to a specific city because guaranteed, if that city is known for having a high expat population, and just in case you don't know what an expat is, it's basically somebody who's moved to that country that's not from there. And yeah, so for example, Costa Rica has a high expat community. There's a lot of people from North America that have moved there, and probably a lot of people from Europe as well. Yeah, so expat groups are great because these are people that have moved here. They've already done lots of research. They already know the best places to go hang out. They know where the social events are. And sometimes they even put on social events that you can join. So yeah, your other option is to go to sites like meetup.com. And that's where you're going to find a lot of events, a lot of local events. Meetup is just one example of something that's used all around the world. So go there as well. I'm sure there's other groups too. Just do a bit of research and you'll probably find other ways to online where you can find social events. All right, and my other favorite way to make connections when I'm traveling is by doing day tours. I always meet amazing people when I go on a day tour. And I feel like when I'm alone on a tour, people are just gravitating towards me. They don't want me to be alone and they take me under their wing. So yeah, and sometimes there's other solo people there too. So finding day tours, you can always look online. There's always a tour company online that you can book directly there. But if you want the best price, honestly, I recommend booking your day tours right in that exact city, and often just from somebody that will approach you in the city. But of course, you want to do your research as well and make sure you don't get scammed. But for example, the same tours that I did in Nicaragua, if I would have booked them online, they would have been at least 3 times the price compared to just walking into a day tour company in Nicaragua. So just go right to the city, find their tour company locations, and just go in there, and guaranteed you're probably gonna have a cheaper price than if you booked it online. Alrighty, now let's talk about how to research where you're gonna go stay. You know, obviously it's a lot easier if you just book a group trip. All you gotta do is book your flights and bam, you're there. Somebody else is taking care of all the details. But if you're wanting to travel more solo and have a lot of flexibility in your schedule, then you're going to have to do all your own research. And there's so many different ways to do your research. So here's some of my recommendations. All right, so my first recommendation for doing your research, finding out the best areas for you to stay in, is going to be back to Facebook groups. So again, the travel Facebook groups, the expat Facebook groups, they're going to be great places for you to ask all of your questions about where you're planning to go. And people love giving their recommendations. So go in there, ask questions, read other things that people have posted, and you're going to get a ton of information there. Yeah, then there's places like YouTube, obviously. YouTube is one of the best places to research a location because there's so many travel influencers out there, and they share a lot of really good information in their video logs. So go ahead, go on YouTube, search up the country you want to go to and maybe a few cities, and guaranteed you're going to find a bunch of videos where people have already been talking about it, telling you where you should go stay, the different types of things you can do in each of those cities, the safest places to go, everything. and sometimes you can even ask questions on their video and they'll reply to you. And secondary to YouTube would be looking through travel blogs. So it's the same thing. Just go on Google, search the city and the country, and guaranteed you're going to find a bunch of blogs where someone's already written about this and given you all of their recommendations. And some other options is, of course, to use Google, go through Google reviews on all of the different accommodations that you want to stay in, make sure they got good reviews. I think that's the most important part is your accommodations. You want to make sure that you're staying somewhere that people enjoyed, that they felt safe at, and so on. So Google reviews, TripAdvisor, and so on. And you can do the same thing with researching where to go out to eat and different tour activities and so on. And finally, you can use ChatGPT. ChatGPT is kind of like Google on steroids. You can ask ChatGPT, hey, I'm going to go to this city. What are the safest locations to stay in? And what are the locations that I should stay away from? I did that recently for somewhere I was researching for my next travels. And yeah, it pulled up somebody's blog that had like a whole map of, okay, this area is safe, this one's not safe. So yeah, don't be afraid to use ChatGPT as well. It's just a faster way of Googling it. But yeah, honestly, in your research on where to stay, your biggest concern is going to be safety. So try and research as much as you can beforehand on specifically safety. All of the other stuff in your research comes secondary. Your safety is going to be your number one priority. And, as far as figuring out what restaurants or hotels you end up liking the best, like those are kind of like whatever. There's going to be some good ones. There's going to be some iffy ones that you'll laugh about later. But the most important part is that you're going to be safe. So yeah, let's talk about your general safety tips. I'm sure a lot of these are going to be common knowledge, but maybe there's a couple things that I'll say that you didn't think about. So first of all, if you can't find out for sure which is the most safest location to stay in a given city, my recommendation is to try and stay somewhere more central, somewhere more in the city center. That's generally going to be safer just because there's more people around compared to staying in some quiet rural area. In a city, there's going to be more lights, there's going to be more people around, there's going to be more travelers. It doesn't mean that you're safe from getting mugged or whatever, but generally more people around you, the better. And yeah, this one should also be common knowledge too. This is probably something you already do in your own city, is don't walk late at night by yourself. I think we all know that, especially as women. I think most of us know that going out at night, there's more likely to have something happen compared to being out in the day by yourself. Now, my other tip as well, if you're out solo, if you're out at a restaurant or you decide to go out at a bar or whatever, honestly, keep your alcohol drinking to a minimum. And honestly, I barely even drink when I travel, especially when I'm alone, because we make dumb decisions when we're drunk, okay? That's just the bottom line. You're not going to be as careful when you're drinking. You're going to be more trusting of that random stranger that you met, and you're just more likely to get in situations that you wouldn't have if you would have just stayed sober. So if you can, just limit your alcohol. Yeah, the only time that I drink alcohol when I'm solo traveling is if I'm in a group trip or have met up with a friend there and we're out somewhere where we feel safe. And we have like a taxi ride home, all of those things, everything's all in check to be as safe as possible if I'm going to have a few drinks. And my next tip is to listen to your gut, listen to your instincts, whether you think that sounds woo-woo or not. We innately know when something is not safe. We know, we get those bad vibes from people sometimes that are like, hey, come do this. If anything at all ever feels uncomfortable, you need to say no and get yourself out of that situation. Just trust yourself, okay? You're getting that gut feeling for a reason. So just listen to it. It could sound silly to other people. If you're somewhere and you're suddenly not feeling safe, just get out of there, okay? All right, so my next safety tip is in regards to being safe with your money, because if something happens to you, which is not super likely depending on if you've done your proper research on where to go and you're doing all the other safe things, the most likely thing to happen to you, if anything, is somebody's going to try and steal your money. They're going to try and mug you. So just some general tips here is to not always have all of your money on you at all time. You know, hopefully you're staying somewhere where you feel safe to leave some money and a couple of credit cards there. You know, you don't have everything with you. You don't carry your passport with you all the time, stuff like that. So just bring enough cash that you need for the day on you and a credit card, and that's basically it. And bring everything in like a fanny pack or something that you can keep like right in the front of you. Because if you have a little backpack that you're keeping on your back, that's a scenario where you're going to be more likely to get pickpocketed because you can't see. And if you're somewhere crowded, it's actually quite easy for people to just sneak into your bag and grab something out of there. So keep everything in front of you. Even like I'll have my fanny pack and I'll even like hold it, you know? I'm very mindful of my belongings when I'm traveling and I'm by myself, especially in a crowded area. And yeah, and other than the possibility of getting mugged, the other thing that might happen to you is you might get scammed. So somebody might sell you something that's defective. So for example, somebody came around one time, I can't remember where I was, but they had a little speaker thing that looked like a Coca-Cola can. And he played it on his version of it. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And then he sold me a defective unit. And I spent more money on that than I wanted to, even in the beginning. And yeah, by the time I realized it didn't work properly, he'd already pieced out. So yeah, just be mindful of things like that. You know, if you're going to buy something from a random person, I would maybe avoid things like electronics or just things that, you know, you don't know right away if it's going to work for you. Just buy something that, you know right away it works. Like, you know, like a piece of clothing or a necklace. The biggest safety tip of all that I really want you to do if you're going to go travel solo is have someone back home that you're leaving all of your trip plans with. So when I travel solo, I have a couple friends in a group chat and I send them every new location that I go to. So, you know, a lot of the times I don't know my whole trip right offhand, but I keep them updated as I go. I say, hey, I'm now in this city and I'm staying here for this many nights. Here's the address. And, you know, they know that I'm going to keep checking in with them. So if they don't hear from me for a while, then they know, okay, maybe we should be concerned. And at least they know where I was last. You know, if you're traveling all around and you're doing this big travel trip, going to multiple countries and multiple cities, if nobody knows where you are at a given time, it's going to make it really hard for people to come find you if nobody knows where you are in a given day and they don't know where you were in the past couple days. You know, people need to know a precise location of where you are so that they can hopefully find you if you are in danger. So just have some people back home that know where you are at all times and know when they can expect another check-in from you. All right, so those are some general tips for traveling solo, and I hope that's been helpful. I hope it's made you want to consider going on it. Honestly, traveling solo is not as scary as people make it out to be. It's definitely not as lonely as you think it's going to be. And honestly, if you give yourself the chance to just give it a try, it's probably going to change your life. And you're going to have amazing experiences. You're going to meet so many people. You're going to get to have a nice, flexible trip. And you're going to have a lot of good time to self-reflect as well. So I hope you will give it a try. And if you have any questions, please leave them below. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to send over some Facebook groups. If you're like, hey, I wanted to know that solo female travel group you're in, just ask me below. I'm an open book. But yeah, I'm actually really excited because I am planning my next travel trip right now and hoping to be gone for a few months. So hopefully you're subscribed to the channel because you'll get to see where I end up. And I will, of course, be sharing all of my tips on the places I travel to. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.